right, thank you for those that are joining our PreSales Collective webinar today. As always, we'll get started in just a moment. For those that are joining, let us know if it's the first time you've been here or if you've been to a PreSales Collective webinar before. Welcome, Bill. Welcome first time. All right. Steve, first time. Ricardo, second time. Great. We'll get started here in just a moment. Oh, Peter Cohan, Kishore, Jeff Lewis. Some active individuals who are here every time. We really appreciate it. All right. Fourth or fifth time. Marco, first time. Sounds great. All right. All right, for sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started here in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And just want to welcome everyone to the PreSales Collective webinar, preparing our teams for the new normal. I don't know about you, but we've heard this topic of new normal plenty of times. And so today's webinar, we're going to be diving into what this actually means and getting into some specifics. So before we do that, I would like the panel to introduce themselves today so you can get to know who these people are, how long they've been in pre-sales. So Natasha, maybe we can start with you.
Hello, I'm Natasha Baks. I'm the owner of the demo scene. Demo scene focuses on improving pre-sales skills. We're based in the Netherlands. I've been in pre-sales before myself. I was pre-sales at SAP for about 10 years before I started coaching and training SAP's resellers to become more successful in the field. Then I started the demo scene 9 years ago because I wanted to help more pre-sales outside of the SAP ecosystem.
That's great. Thanks, Natasha. Adam?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Adam Freeman. So I work at the Access Group, a UK-based software company. We predominantly focus on mid-market and some enterprise deals. I lead the team, so I'm the head of pre-sales there now. So there are 11 divisions now, all with relevant pre-sales, and we have leadership in that place. But we're a challenging environment because we're in hyper growth mode. So we have a lot of very particular challenges. And so my background in accountancy, I'm a qualified accountant, and then I moved into IT. So I'm not from a traditional IT background as well, which I think has pros and it has cons as well. So different perspective maybe.
That's great. And congratulations on your recent promotion, Adam.
Thank
Justin?
you.
Yeah, hi everybody. So my name is Justin Hibbs. I'm Solution Engineering Director over at Financial Force for EMEA. We are a Salesforce ISV offering ERP on the Salesforce platform. I always have to get a little plug in for the village I live in Tiptree in Essex, which is home to the world famous Wilkins Jam. Google it if you haven't tried it. I'm not on commission, but please check it out. I've worked in software and technology and sales cycles for about 16 of my 21 years out doing customer facing stuff. I've worked as an IC and a leader across pre-sales, obviously, but also in areas like alliance and channels, enablement, technical account management, customer success, support. I did a stint on the dark side of sales, but we don't talk about that, but settled firmly back in pre-sales.
Great. Thanks, Justin. And want to thank you guys for being here today and really appreciate your time and really looking forward to this discussion. So before we get started though, I just want to thank everyone who's on the line today for joining. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your attendance. We know, as always, the PreSales Collective could not be possible without you joining, without you being active. So we really definitely appreciate it. Continue to lean in. It's been great to see the success and the growth of PreSales Collective. And for those that are joining for the first time, for one, my name is James Kakis. I help lead the PreSales Collective, leader at Salesforce. But really, we started this initiative really in April, and it has taken off globally. It's been a lot of fun. And we have a lot of people that are putting a lot of time and energy into this. And so we've been putting out multiple blogs per week. We have a bi-weekly newsletter. We've been doing weekly webinars for the past couple months. There's a podcast that launches every Monday. And then a Slack channel that has nearly 900 people in it after 2 months. And it's been really great to see professionals around the world and the globe connecting with each other, asking questions, getting help, looking for jobs. So it's been a lot of fun. So if you haven't checked out these resources, please do. It's been a lot of great fun, and it's been a lot of time and energy by a number of people getting to know each other, but it's been enjoyable. So as we get into the webinar, I'd like to give some advice on how we make the most out of today's webinar. Number one is ask questions in the Q&A. So we were going to go through some questions today, but there will be a Q&A section at the end. So I will be sorting those questions, and we'll make sure that they're asked of our group. And be active in the chat. If you have thoughts, opinions, if you have additional, want to raise your hand about a topic, please put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout. And so as I get started, one thing that we ask everybody every time is please let us know your role. Understanding what your role is allows us to have a better understanding of our audience today, so we can make sure we're catering our message. So once we do that, we'll get started with our slides. Perfect. Looks like we have a number of individuals. And just want to highlight the takeaways from today. Takeaways are important in terms of how we frame today's webinar and what you want to get out of it. So embracing the new normal as a way to identify new best practices and adaptability. Identifying and improving ROI is more critical than ever. And we'll get into that and those specifics here soon. Promoting inclusivity, flexibility, and greater collaboration with your prospects. And checking on your teammates. Again, we're missing a lot of that water cooler talk. Missing being able to see people at customers in the office. So we'll talk about what that actually means. So thank you for those who filled out our poll. Sounds great. And we are going to get started. So for today's discussion, I'll pose a question, and then I'll stop sharing the screen and re-put the question back in the chat while our team is asking. So we've been talking about this term new normal for a couple of months now, but I'm not really sure what it means. I think everyone's got a little bit of a different definition. So we're going to start with Natasha. What does the term new normal mean to you?
Well, I think, the short answer is getting out of the habit of communicating face-to-face. The longer answer is that the new normal means an accelerated push into an evolution that had already started a few years ago, but we were by then a bit afraid of embracing it, and now we're pushed into it.
Perfect. Thank you, Natasha. Justin?
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of the word normal because I find it a bit constraining, and for me it depends so much depending on what you're selling, who you're selling to, how you sell it, and how you need to sell it. So the irony, though, of being on a webinar that's got it in the name isn't lost on me, right? But I think for me, when we come out of the pandemic, I think it's been really important to embrace and not lose any positive changes if we were able to make them in our business, that we were able to make if we were fortunate enough to be in that position. So I think post-COVID, like a new normal for me, should and will hopefully be a positive increment on life before COVID in some way. But I think we do need to not stand still after that, right? So continual evolution is really important. And then I think in general terms, this new normal, I think we're going to see COVID driving a lot more in terms of speed of digital transformation and a lot more demand around digital transformation. So I expect that to be a big factor in the new normal as well.
That's great. Thanks for that, Justin. Adam?
100%. And I 100% agree, Justin. I don't like the word normal because I think as tech people, we've always seek to improve what we do continually. And we're in a continual kind of evolution of best practice. And I think the problem with finding a new normal and why everyone's looking for new normal is we've been in this accelerated pace of change. You know, we've not only changed our working practices, but our home life. A lot of people have never worked this intensely from home consistently with their family around, and school's been closed, and balancing social with work aspects has been challenging. So new normal is, how do I find a new work-life balance where maybe I'm not used to that, but how do I also embrace new tech, new ways of working with my colleagues, maybe even new structural changes that a lot of companies have brought in. So particularly digital pre-sales teams is starting to become a normal thing. And that's kind of, how does a pre-sales person interact with new functions within a business as well? So it's opening up, you mentioned at the start, inclusivity and flexibility. That applies in all areas of our life now. And I think it's just this accelerated, compressed pace of change, when some people, as we know, are better dealing with change than others as well.
Yep, absolutely. Great perspectives. So I'll move on to our second question, which is, do we think there will be customer meetings in person this year? And a big shout out to Peter Cohen, who's already asked a number of questions, all of which are included in our list here today. So Peter, this one is on the list. So we'll start with Natasha. Do we think we'll be meeting with customers in person this year?
Yes, I believe there will be some local customer meetings when local situation allows this. We see this happening already in the Netherlands. But during these meetings, we will notice two things. One is that there will always be people dialing in or attending remotely. And two, we will realize that dealing with these mixed audiences is even more difficult than being remote yourself. And I believe that this will result in a change of our perception towards remote communication. It will be the start of embracing remote communication fully. That's what I believe that will be the result of that.
Good perspective, Natasha. Justin?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a no. With customers, I don't think we will. And that's partly a UK perspective, and then I'll talk globally in a second as well. So I think for me, there's two aspects to consider. I think it's not just considering what the customers want, but it's also, from my perspective, how the level of comfort my team members have, their comfort with going back to face-to-face meetings at the moment, and then moving forward as well. I think I can see some level of face-to-face kicking back off in the UK. We're already starting to see pockets of it. But if I think about the types of meetings that I traditionally see my team engaged in, which are generally multiple stakeholders across multiple locations, then I expect these to continue remotely for the foreseeable, probably out to the rest of the year. And then if I take a global perspective, I think we're going to see remote carry on for the significant majority for the rest of this year. But I think the key here really, and what we're trying to do as a business, is personal choice, right? That's on the side of the customer, but also on the side of the team and everybody involved.
Yep. Adam, your perspective on here?
I'm 50-50, and I think it'll be I'm starting to talk about seeing things like a remote first policy. Okay, so coming out of this pandemic could we do that meeting remote? Can we add what we would face-to-face over the web with the tech stack that we would employ? The answer to that is no, and we are able to go to, and the customer's happy with that, and the member of staff is happy with that, then that's okay. But like Justin said, it has to be about personal choice, and someone's personal situation has to come into account. If they have someone in the house who's a little bit more vulnerable, or they feel uncomfortable for reasons other than work, and I need to let the team drive that. One of the things we ask the pre-sales team and the rest of the employees actually at the company is how ready to come back to an office do they feel? Because one of the things that we have to bear in mind is, if we just jump back into face-to-face customer contact because we can, then we could easily be seen as super spreaders. And do we want to potentially have that that risk, which we would naturally, anyone visiting multiple sites in a week is going to carry an increased risk. And how prepared are we to carry that risk around our customers? And again, it depends what industry you work in. If it's financial sector with a big boardroom where you can be 2 meters apart, yeah, I can foresee that happening. But if it's a confined meeting space, and maybe it's in a sector where care homes, for example, would we be going to a care home to see someone? Absolutely not. So I think there's so many variables. That's why I'm kind of 50-50 really.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And we've had a couple of notes from Steve and Esha saying, no, they don't think this year. And I think from my perspective, I've even heard a situation last month. It was quarter close where the customer told the AE, whom I know, said, hey, I'll close this deal, but I want to meet with you in person. And this individual was vetoed from like 5 layers up that said, we don't care about the deal. You're not going in person. And that person didn't get the deal. They obviously didn't hit their quota. They didn't hit their quota because of this deal. And it's just, you know, what Peter Cohen mentioned in the chat too. A lot of HR departments, a lot of companies don't want to take on that risk this year. And so, you know, I could foresee a situation where our customers are actually wanting and okay with us, but some of these companies are not. I don't know if anyone saw, Google is actually keeping their employees home until next July, I believe, next summer. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens this year and how the regional shift happens and the global shift. If some countries, some states, some cities will allow for that to happen versus others. It is a really interesting perspective. So a question that I'm really looking forward to, because this has been a really fun thing to watch throughout the last couple months, is are we starting to see shifts in buyer behaviors? Natasha, can you start us off?
Yeah, I think we do. Because on the one hand, companies, your customers and prospects have been keeping up with the times. It's not only because of the COVID, but it's the evolution over time. They've been learning a thing or two or even 3 about software. They know what they need. They're well informed about what their market has to offer and what technical specifications match with their objectives. By the time that you have reached the evaluation stage of the buyer cycle, decisions have already been made. And your pre-sales efforts might have missed the mark. Secondly, many companies are not looking for a system of records anymore, but for a software partner that knows what they need to beat competition or to innovate as fast as possible. They want a partner to explore the best suitable IT roadmap. And I think that's a trend that has been going on for years already, but it's sped up. It's speeded up because of the COVID situation. People are exploring by themselves now. It's more chaotic than before.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Justin?
Yeah, I agree. I think Natasha's spot on. But I think it's been going on for some time now, right? So the shift in buyer behaviors isn't something new with the COVID element, but it's definitely focused minds, though, I think, in organizations on what's important to them and ultimately what their priorities are and what they need to do. I think we've also seen with the shift to remote an ability for companies, organizations now to include a much broader range of stakeholders in the sales cycle, maybe in some cases because they're more readily available. Maybe it just becomes easier to organize things in some ways, to jump on a video conference or take part in a discussion. So that's an additional factor that's coming into the mix for us in the pre-sales world. But I think ultimately it's tricky to give a narrow answer on this, right? Because I think it depends on the organization, the sector, the size, the maturity of the business, what you're selling, the maturity of that solution, and so on. So yeah, I think we've seen an increment again with COVID, but I think this has been a journey we've been on for some time in terms of the behavior shift and what we have to contend with in a sales cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam?
100% agree with everything that's been said. I think that the flexibility of this new remote world is, and I'm going to say remote first because that seems to be the way things are going, is you can have smaller, more flexible, more inclusive meetings, which is one of the key takeaways we've said here, right? But as much as we're finding a new normal, our customers are also finding a new normal. And I think with that becomes, there might be people that were looking at sales prior to COVID, they obviously shelved things for a little period of time and then they've come back to the table with a new set of requirements. So for example, actually what's your ability for remote access into the system? What's your cybersecurity policy? What's your backup? Because the risk of cybersecurity has gone off the chart right now. You look at some of the big cyber attacks that are happening, that wasn't on a lot of even mid-market, mid kind of size companies' radars until recently. So with remote access and an ability to securely access data, just like Natasha said, how complete a solution have you got? Are you a software provider or are you a technology partner? And they are different. But I think a customer's ability to go and get knowledge from other areas of the business, okay, but also their peers, you know, what do you use? They're bringing more software companies to the table. I would say I feel that people who are in a position either got resource, budget, and time to do it are acting fast. I think as long as they can see an ROI, they're acting fast. I think the people where there's one of those three things that aren't quite cemented in are taking longer. And I think that's what you're seeing, two extremes. You're not really seeing that kind of, you know, mid deal cycle. They're either faster or longer.
Yeah, all great perspectives. And I think something to add in is, so at Salesforce, I sell to manufacturing companies, and they've been talking about revolutionizing technology in manufacturing since 2000. And this is maybe the first time where you actually had to, because a lot of these companies are like, oh, we've been wanting to do it, but now that we have to, they've been forced to innovate. It's actually been really interesting to see. And so I personally have felt that things are going back to, people are starting to get used to this situation. And so they're buying. And to Natasha's point again about people are looking for vendors, are looking for partners versus vendors. I think we're starting to see that. And, you know, Steve mentioned something about how interactions are getting more casual. And I think this is probably something that's more on top of mind forever, is that interactions are getting less formal, more casual, and are starting to look more like B2C than B2B than they ever have before. And so mixed in with everything kind of happening has given us this perfect storm of really where we're at now. So I want to dive into a little bit of a specific topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts at this point is, you know, do we really need to start requalifying opportunities and where we're spending our time? So Justin, we'll start with you on this question.
Yeah, look, I think if we haven't already been doing that, we've probably missed the boat a little bit as an organization. So I know for us, really early on in the pandemic, we ran an outreach to all of our customers and prospects just to check in, understand how they were doing. You know, I think it's important you do business with people the way you would like people to do business back with you as well. We did see some sales organizations step back entirely from sort of prospecting and sales engagement, but I think, again, that depends very much on what you need to do for your employees to protect and support them, how you want to engage with your prospects, what your market looks like, what your business looks like, right? So, but I think fundamentally a healthy discussion with any organization you're in a sales cycle with is important to be successful on both sides. Again, it goes back to Natasha's point of it's less about choosing a vendor and more about choosing a business partner, right? And so it's not just about requalifying opportunities for me, it's about engaging in different ways, showing more flexibility in how we engage with organizations, with our prospects and with our customers. You know, and I mentioned before, we've seen a shift to include more stakeholders all of a sudden. So that means we have to be more flexible in the way we approach sales engagements, the way we approach demonstrations, the way we facilitate sessions with organizations. So that's really key. So I think in short, yeah, we should have been requalifying and hopefully we have been, but it's about the continued engagement. And I think fundamentally, as you go through that engagement, it never hurts to keep checking whether you're doing business in the right way for that organization to make the partnership work.
Yeah, that's great perspective, Justin. Natasha?
Yeah, and I agree with Justin. It is important also to requalify issues that were critical before the pandemic. Might have evaporated in the current climate. There may be budget cuts. So if your customer has little money and your solution is not solving the current critical business issues, you are wasting yours, but also more importantly, your customer's time. So I think it's really important to requalify and to find out what is on there, what's the most critical thing they're facing currently, because that's where they will spend their money on. And maybe that's not your solution and you could better spend your time on something else.
Agreed. Adam?
Yeah, I think it's such a fluid situation. You just can't not requalify. You know, you need to be able to help the customer the most. You need to understand where they're at right now, you know, and I always say, you know, the old chestnut comes out that there's two kinds of qualification, right? There is sales qualification and pre-sales qualification. So even if the sales qualification happens again and the customer's still got budget, still got desire, still got all those kind of criteria to address, we as pre-sales professionals should still be doing our own qualification. And in my opinion, on a regular basis. So if the, you know, between now and Christmas, if there's a deal that's forecast, you know, into January, February time, we should be keeping in communication with that customer to find out if anything significant is changing. Are there new ROIs that we need to address? You know, be closer to them and become their advocate, you know, help them. And that's the rise of buyer enablement, right? And all those things come to the fore. You have to help them to help you. And to do that, you have to have constant communication. It's got to be more fluid.
Absolutely. And Stephanie just mentioned starting with empathy and qualification is key. It really is. And actually, I like what Bill mentioned too. Bill said they're asking prospects what types of projects are making the green bucket versus the red bucket, and how do they get in the green bucket? I mean, super transparent and super straightforward. I mean, it's important to ask. Absolutely. So I want to get a little bit granular here on this next question. How have you forced your teams to be innovative and trying to explain complex problems without being in person or not using a whiteboard? Sounds difficult. So what are some things that Adam, you and your team are doing?
So I'm quite blessed really with a very, very knowledgeable team in terms of the industry. So a lot of the members of my team haven't just come from pure IT. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but what they've got is they've got a lot of contacts within the relevant industry. So what they're doing is they're doing things like webinars. They're branching out from just doing the normal activity we do to almost working with marketing in a new way, really, which is how do we be a leading voice on, you know, like we're talking about new normal. How do we help our customers define what new normal is? And we almost start to help drive that conversation, because that's a great conversation to have, because we need to understand what the client's facing. I mean, embracing new tech, you know, like say the rise of Teams and Zoom and the weekly Zoom quiz, you know, you've got all these, suddenly you've got these users, you know, on web conferencing. They've never ever used it before. So you've got customers on the other end that have never used web conferencing before. So etiquette of, do I have my webcam on or off? You know, I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with someone doesn't work with me. And it was a lady, and she said, I was really uncomfortable turning my webcam on because I haven't had my hair done. I haven't had my nails. I don't feel nice about myself. So it's really hard to turn my webcam on. And I'd never kind of factored that in. But I think all of these things come together as, you know, embracing the tech is more than just, you know, the tech that we interact with. It's tech for our customers, and it's absorbing them into our world that we would see normal. We see web channels and going on these kind of webinars as normal. Our customers necessarily don't. So for me, it's some of the innovations have been around how do we make a customer feel confident and comfortable with our new ways of working and communicating. So.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without talking.
Yeah.
Always one.
Yeah,
always
happen at some point.
I'm not gonna lie, we have like company all hands, and like when Mark Benioff's talking and he's on mute, it's great. It humanizes the experience of Mark Benioff's talking on mute. Justin, do you want to give us your perspective on this?
Yeah, sure. In the prep for this, we established that Adam's far more innovative than me when he started talking about QR codes and all that kind of stuff. I still have a level of distrust for quartz and wear a non-digital watch. I'm not sure it'll catch on. But look, in our business, we've been pretty fortunate. So I'm coming from a fortunate position, right? Where in our business in EMEA, a lot of our engagement model was already involved a significant proportion of remote engagement that was across sales, pre-sales, and professional services. So I was lucky. Most of my team were already used to working from home. They were set up. They were used to using the content. I think Adam makes a really key point, though, in that the organisation on the other end of the spectrum aren't necessarily as far down that journey with us. We were also fortunate. We had a lot of virtual content already created so that we could encompass a multifaceted engagement style, right? That we used in coordination with great tools like I forgot the name, but one of the tools we use anyway to help drive marketing material out there and to help us really get our voice out there. But for me, innovation isn't really something you can force. For me, innovation comes out of giving a team the freedom to have a degree of autonomy, to have a voice and to learn from each other. So one of the best initiatives I've seen happen in my tenure here in the financial force business with my team is an initiative they set up themselves, where they come together on a regular basis just to discuss what's working for them, what's not, and come up with new ideas. And they drive that. On occasion, I'll facilitate it, but very often I'm not involved in those discussions, and that's great because that empowers them to then take action on the back of it. Yeah, I'm yet to crack the nut of things like remote whiteboard, so I'm open to ideas on that. But I think fundamentally, tools aside, it boils back down to some real basics, right? Which is good discovery always helps you have a much better and more fruitful discussion, right? Good use of tone and pace on the end of a video versus in person, because you lose an element of the ability to interpret body language. Good open communication, honesty with an organization, to be able to have those kinds of discussions Adam's talking about, where some people don't feel comfortable on the end of a video versus others that do. And I think the big challenge for me, and again, I'm yet to crack it, that you can do so well with in person, is that kind of impromptu discussion. How are we doing? How's the demo going? Are we tracking right here? You seem to not be liking what we're showing you. How can I sort of convince you that we're a good solution and that we're the right fit for you? Not having those moments with a personal interaction is very hard to get around. So again, anybody that's got any great ideas on that, I'm open to, because that's really difficult, I think.
I think you make a good point, actually, Justin. Sorry to jump back in. I mean, there's tools. So I think someone in the chat has mentioned Mural. That's something, you know, we've kind of embraced. There are tools like Microsoft Whiteboard. There's a lot of tools, but the tool doesn't solve the problem. It's like Justin said, it's the desire to solve the problem that gets it solved, right? So like Justin said, the team having daily catch-ups actually has probably proved more fruitful than the tech. I mean, we've employed consensus en masse to get the message out there instantly. And that has helped no end, but that's also helped us qualify. And to be brutally honest, that's something we should always have done. It's accelerated the adoption. So I think the tech is great, but you've got to have a desire to use the tech in the right way.
Yeah.
It's called Showpad. Showpad is what it's called.
That's my previous company, Justin. That's my
It's very good, James.
Yes. Happy to hear that. I'll pass that word along. No, great perspectives from both you guys on this. And I like both angles, because I think it's the technology, but it's the team, it's the innovative. It's getting in front of customers and doing things differently that make you stand out. So a couple people have mentioned some different tools in the chat, which I appreciate. One thing that I've been utilizing in my team is Menti, or Kahoot, people might be familiar with, and actually doing surveys throughout the meeting presentation about what's working, what's not working, what matters, and having it be anonymous, especially if you have a big group of 20, 30 people can't raise their hand. It's great to use like a word cloud in that perspective. I've enjoyed that one. So Natasha, this question is for you. So is the demo more important than ever?
Yes and no. The demo in the early phases of the buying journey is becoming far more important. Before, we tried to prevent delivering a demo in this part of the buying journey because it was too risky. Chances were high that the opportunity would never be on the project calendar. But now, with the shift in the buying behavior, it is important that you have an answer. In these early phases, you need a different type of demo. You'll need a teaser demo as a start of building a relationship with your customer. That is still a risky phase, so don't spend too much time in tuning it into the customer, but just teasing him. The demo in the evaluation phase is becoming less critical in the perspective of beating a number of competitors and dealing with these horrible scripted demos. I think that they are still here, but they will gradually move away because decisions have already been made by then. The demo in that phase will be more and more evolve in a conversation with the customer. Conversation facilitated by demonstrating specific capabilities in your software. The customer will always want to see and feel the real thing, but is no longer interested in this grand tour of everything that you can do. So the demo will be equally important, but there will be two different types of demos serving two different needs to be successful in your sales.
Great. I really like that perspective. And we actually had a couple of questions around demo. Ricardo, I hope that answered your question as well. Very good. Thanks, Natasha. We're going to move on to a topic that I think everyone is always hearing about or interested in is ROI. So this has to be on top of mind for everybody at this given time, right? And so maybe let's talk about ROI in terms of purchasing right now. So Natasha, what perspectives do you have around ROI being more important than ever?
Well, if you cannot tie functionality to business value for the customer, they will not make an investment. And this is nothing new. It has been of all times and will not change. To talk about business value, you will need a thorough discovery. During this discovery, you can build a relationship, you can become the trusted advisor, you can influence the rules of the game. And I feel that in this working remotely type of world we're at, that having discovery calls is easier because people are working remote. It's more easy to get in touch with someone, maybe regularly, and to really get a sense of what is it that they are looking for and what's the added value that they expect from a new solution. And that will be the ultimate way of driving sales, as it always has been.
Justin?
Yeah, look, I think the so what factor, right, as a few of us refer to it as, is definitely more important than ever, has to be baked into everything we do in pre-sales. Most organizations I'm talking to that are still in a position to procure a solution and are looking to spend money, they're focused on three main things, right? They're focused on the impact of that solution and that purchase, the value, and then the time to value. And those are quite fundamental criteria for them deciding whether they spend money or not. But I think for me, there's an important distinction between ROI and value. So I think ROI is quite synonymous with a number, but value for me covers not just the traditional elements of that return on the investment, but can also cover the personal value factors as well, that the impact a solution can have on an individual. If you can unlock the personal value, then you really start to win hearts and minds in the sales cycle. Look, and if a company's already got budget signed off, one would hope that the board that signed that budget off, or the shareholders or the stakeholders that have signed that off, have done the numbers and have decided they can spend X because they're going to get back Y. But the difficult thing, and the thing we have to focus on, I think, is that personal value piece to bring the stakeholders on the journey with us across a broader layer across the business. The good news, though, it's not rocket science, right? That concept of I'm clicking on something, so what? And that continuous question to ourselves of I've shown this, so what? So what does this mean? And then tailoring that to individuals, that's not rocket science. And so we should, and we could, and we hopefully are baking that into all of our pre-sales cycles.
Great perspective. I like the comment around value being just as important. Adam, thoughts?
100%. So I think, I mean, we started to see prior to lockdown the rise of the kind of the value engineer type role and pre-sales people and CSM and that whole world kind of coming together a little bit more than it was. And I think we can learn from that. And to kind of extend what Justin was saying really is, how can we learn from what the value engineers are doing and kind of bake that earlier into our processes so that we can identify real business issue and what the critical success factor is for what's going to make a difference to that business. I think the difference that the COVID situation's brought is you've got an increased stakeholder audience, and so the scope for someone getting out of that conversation what they want is a little bit more fluid. I think I love the idea, and with my team I'm kind of working on a concept of what I call pain chains. So a pain in a business leads to another pain. Now that might be an industry known objective, or it might be something we uncover about that business. But to kind of knit it together is, well, okay, manufacturing. So if I've got a low yield on a production line, how does that impact the CFO? What does he care? What ROI, what value statement is he looking for? So in my eyes, I have something called a pain chain, which is linking all the pains and the factors together, and a value chain, because the value chain supports the pain chain, if that makes sense. And I think that extension of ROI is what makes a difference. Not just identifying ROI, but then not just even the so what, but the so what after that, and you have to keep going.
Yeah, that's great. No, I like that perspective. I'm actually going to jump ahead to our last planned question. We have actually had a number of really good questions from the audience. So if you have other questions, keep them coming. I want to get through some of those because I think they're really impactful. So this is a question for Adam and then Justin. So we've talked about the people aspect of things throughout this. And as a people leader myself, I think it's really top of mind. And so what are some things that you guys are doing differently to support your teams right now? And Adam, we'll start with you.
So one of the main things is everyone okay? I think that's the main question we should be asking as leaders, are you okay? And understanding, the teams, as much as they're happy to share their personal situation. I've had a conversation with some of my team members that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise, if I'm brutally honest. I've got to know my team, every day when you have a call and you're in your house, you're letting them into your house. So there's a level of personal connection that we probably otherwise wouldn't have had. One of the things we're doing as leaders is we have daily calls across the teams with their team members. We're able to identify issues earlier. We do like a weekly survey that comes out company-wide that identifies anyone who might have symptoms of COVID, anyone who's got a change in personal circumstances we need to know about, things like that. Our kickoff event that was a couple of weeks ago was all virtual. We raise a lot of money for charity. Actually, it's my son's charity, but we had all of that virtually, and we had staff members with particular talents, kind of singing and music, kind of do that to the company. So I genuinely believe this period of time, we were educated as leaders on how to bring the teams together, and I think we did that very early. And when I look back, that was the only thing we could know with certainty was we've got to bring our teams together. We've got to know our teams. More importantly, we've got to look after our teams. That is the most important thing right now. Absolutely.
No, it's great. And great job on that fundraiser. I saw those videos floating around LinkedIn.
Yeah. If anyone wants to laugh, you can go and see me dressed up in fancy dress with my 2-year-old boy. Yeah. I know Natasha liked that one.
Justin.
You look great.
Justin, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. So look, I think in its simplest form, my job as a leader of people is to listen, right? To listen, to be aware of everybody's situation at home, to make sure I'm doing everything I can to help them all put life first and then work second. Really, I'm quite a big advocate of why we work, and I know I work in order to facilitate life. I don't live in order to do the other. I mean, I know some people do, and I respect that as well, but I think in this environment I've got to listen and be guided by the folks kind of at the end of the Zoom, at the end of the team, and so on. We've been really busy as well though, so front of mind for me has been that balance between wanting to ramp sort of the social interaction to make sure everybody's okay, but also not ramp it to an extent that everybody feels overloaded that they have to commit to this level of social interaction, when at the end of the day, and we've had some comments in the chat and the Q&A around, when they're trying to balance maybe childcare, or they're trying to look after relatives at home, or they're just trying to get their head around the fact that we're in a pandemic, right, which needs a lot of headspace. So I think keywords here are things like tolerance, things like inclusivity, to make sure that we're being inclusive, we're not excluding people who need to do things in certain ways at the moment in order to be able to just continue to live their life, and then as a secondary element, continue to maintain their job, right? We've done the usual kind of things. I think we've got a weekly Bring the Biscuits call. I named it that just because I'm not a big drinker, so I didn't necessarily want to call it Bring a Bottle of Wine. Also, not all weeks are that bad that you need to bring a bottle of wine. And where we just have folks that are around, they gather just to have a chat and sort of talk. So if we haven't had it, if you've been heads down, you haven't had a week where you've needed to communicate with loads of people to find out answers to questions, you've got to touch base. We're doing the usual one-to-ones, the usual team meetings. We use Slack a lot in our business, which is great for collaboration. But again, pre-COVID, a lot of my team worked remotely anyway. And out of the last, I think, 40 or so people I've managed, probably about 75% of those folks have been remote. So you kind of get into a groove of how you work and how you operate. My team's recently asked me to look into doing a virtual escape room for them. I have no idea how that's going to work. I've got the door to my home office closed. I'm not sure if I need to put a lock on it in case I'm no good and I lose. But things like that are always fun, right? But I think for me, the key is finding a balance between injecting some things like that into the business, but also being respectful of the fact that there's a whole heap of life to balance on the other end of work as well.
Yeah, thank you both for your perspectives there, because I wanted to move to the audience Q&A, excuse me, and ask about the childcare question that Stephanie asked. I think it's a great question. It's very timely. I think what I've appreciated is that everyone, or a lot of people, are in the same boat. And so the tolerance, as you mentioned, Justin, is there. So I want to spend the next 5 minutes doing some further Q&A. Adam, a question for you that's come up is about maybe dress code for remote working. Office smart, remote casual. What's your perspective here?
Well, assuming I'm not dressed up in fancy dress, which is my preferred, my preferred route. I said to the guys, as long as you'd be comfortable having your webcam on, that's fine. I'm not going to lie, I've spent pretty much the last 4 months in shorts, right? So, most people pretty much see you from about there upwards. Okay, so, I'm relaxed, but I'm also conscious that if it's a particularly big demo meeting or with a customer, I always like to ask that question, and it's a great icebreaker. Right? How is your dress code for remote working? If they say, yeah, t-shirts, no problem. I draw the line at vests, okay, but t-shirts, I personally I think it should be a collar, but I'm okay with t-shirts too. I kind of let the guys figure that out with themselves, but internally, I'm kind of like, as long as they're doing, what they need to do and they're okay, that's the main thing.
Yeah, agree. And we have a comment from Peter that says pants, please. But I could tell you that of the 4 people speaking right now, I'm not sure how many of us are actually wearing pants right now, but I'm just throwing that out there. Shorts.
I'm wearing slippers. There's always a pair of slippers involved for me, whatever I'm wearing.
Agreed. I like that perspective, Adam. We actually, I heard of a customer who complained that one of the people on the call was wearing a backwards hat and said that they would not ever do work with a company who allows their employees to wear hats on customer calls. So just heard that one a couple of weeks ago. That was interesting. Natasha, a question for you is, has the relationship with our account executives changed during the pandemic?
Well, I'm not sure. What I hear in the field is that there's more communication, there's more calls between pre-sales people and account executives to prepare for meetings, because the symbols during the meeting don't work. So you have to have a conversation. How do we deal with this? What I've heard is that it's sometimes difficult to read each other's minds when you're both working remotely. So there is some friction. I think that was in the beginning of the pandemic very, very painful for a lot of couples, pairs of sales and pre-sales people, but they've solved this by having a conversation and agreeing on new ways of collaborating during presentations. Because they collaborate before the presentation, they also tend to have a better communication about the messaging itself. So I think in the end, the relationship will improve. But I don't know, Justin, Adam, how you see this in your companies.
Thanks, Natasha. Justin, anything to add here?
Yeah, no, I think, again, I'm probably in a fortunate position where the groups that we work with are quite used to working sort of remotely. I think we went through a transition in our business over a few years where we sort of changed the image a little bit of the pre-sales group from sort of a service delivery organization to a business partner. And that's helped us through this period. And we see the AE relationship a lot stronger now. So we sort of transitioned ourselves from you come up and you do this piece of my sales cycle. You come up and if you're lucky, I'll give you a piece of discovery and then I want you to do a demo, to a much more value add sort of engagement through the whole cycle. So that stood us in good stead through the COVID pandemic, because it means we're naturally a bit more collaborative. We are naturally more open with one another. We are able to have much more frank exchange with one another. And it brings you closer as a group, right? So you can then build a deeper understanding more easily of what's going on in people's lives, how they're doing and how they're feeling. And again, I think it comes back to, if you just take a stance of tolerance, understanding, respect, openness, honesty, that goes a long way to just, you know, lead with an assumption that not everything's rosy, but an assumption that you could be on the end of the phone to somebody who actually has got a load of stuff going on behind the scenes, rather than leading with, you know, the thing you need to ask them is top of mind for them. They've been thinking about it all week long. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and thank you both for your perspective here. I think for me, it's just being empathetic, because AEs are under more stress than ever with COVID. The numbers haven't changed. A lot of companies haven't adjusted quotas. So at the end of the day, just trying to put yourself in their shoes. The ask I made of my team 2 weeks ago was, you might get some really ridiculous asks, and if you have time, just do them. Just let's help out where we can right now. Let's be humans. I think a couple people in the chat, Stephanie as well, mentioned that AEs are stressed to the max. So we need to do what we can do to help them out in this given time. Well, I want to thank the three of you for this conversation. This has been a lot of fun. I wish we can actually talk longer. So we'll have to continue the conversation. If anyone has any questions or wants to reach out to Natasha, Justin, or Adam, they are in our Slack environment and Slack community. So feel free to introduce yourself, ask them some follow-up questions. I've just signed them up for some additional work. So appreciate that. Appreciate the three of your time. It's been really great hearing your perspective today. So as always, we'd like, before we sign off, let us know how we did today. Tell us how we did, how impactful this was. And if you have any other feedback on the session, feel free to message me on the Slack environment. Just as we recap, I want to thank you to Consensus. PreSales Collective and Consensus started working together earlier in July, and they were a sponsor for this webinar, allowing us to make it happen. As Adam mentioned, he's been utilizing the product. What's going to happen, you're going to see on the slide here, is we're going to be doing a webinar with Garen, who's the CEO there. I actually just finished the book. I read it in 4 days last week, Buyer Enablement. If anyone's listening to me, I talk about customer centricity all the time. So there's a lot of buzzword synergies between the two concepts. So thank you for Consensus for your time today. PreSales Collective podcast every Monday. We're launching a new episode. If you haven't checked out this week's, it's Analogies and Metaphors with Mr. Peter Cohen himself. It's really good. It's really impactful. You learn a lot. We were actually chatting about it even before this webinar started. I really enjoyed it. I know it's an aspect that I need to learn, so I've been focusing on it. If you haven't been in our Slack community, please join. We have almost 900 people joining. So a big shout out to Brian Massaferi, who's gotten this going. It has been amazing connecting with people all over the globe. I mean, we have industry channels now. We have geo channels. Just the conversations that are happening in the virtual coffee chats have been great. The community's really leaned in. So I'd encourage you to join. Even if you're not familiar with Slack, get familiar. So right now we don't have any webinars initially planned, except one that we'll be putting on the website soon. So Garen and I are going to sit down and talk about buyer enablement, customer centricity, and what is this buzz about buyer enablement. And I think it's really timely as we continue to talk about new normal and those components now. And then if you're not following us on LinkedIn, please do. We're very proud. We passed the 3,000 follower mark earlier this week. We are posting all the content, all the webinars, podcasts, articles on LinkedIn. So if you're enjoying what you're hearing, you're enjoying what you're reading or what you're listening to, please share. Let other professionals know about the community. And really, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate you being here. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a good week.
Thank you.